This former German under-21 captain has beaten cancer but clashed with his former managers, and it's gone from the highs of the Bundesliga to the lows of a bad second Bundesliga club. This is the story of Timo Baumgartl's journey to St. Louis. I should say potential journey to St. Louis, because at the time of this recording, the transfer is not yet official, but Florian Plettenberg broke the news on October 28th that St. Louis City SC is reportedly signing another German, and once again he comes to Missouri at the low transfer price of $0. This would be the sixth directly German player on the roster for 2025, joining quite a few others with either German or Bundesliga ties. And while it's fun to wonder whether this means that St. Louis has to change its official language to German, the story of Timo Baumgartl's journey to St. Louis is filled with highs and lows, and St. Louis is signing him at quite possibly the lowest of the low. But first, we need to look at Timo's journey so far and what it tells us about the type of player and person he is. Timo hails from Böblingen, which is just outside of Stuttgart. German towns did not get enough appreciation, by the way, for how adorable they look. He was discovered by Stuttgart in 2011 at the age of 15 after playing for GSV Meiningen and SSV Reutlingen in his youth career. He actually made his Bundesliga debut for the first team at Stuttgart at the age of 18 in a November 2014 match against Werder Bremen. So you could say that Timo is a 10-year veteran at the top leagues. Actually, that is a fact. Timo played 20 matches for the Bundesliga side in 2014 and 2015 season. He then became a regular in their lineup for the next 5 years, including their brief dip in the second Bundesliga in 2016-17. And it was at this time period where Timo Baumgartl's stock really started to take off. He had earned a reputation for being good at one-on-ones and tackling. He could win aerial duels, pick off a pass, and then distribute it upfield. And at about 6'3" and just under 200 pounds, he had plenty of size to offer to play against grown men. He also started becoming a familiar face on the German under-21s. He even captained them in 3 of his 20 matches with them and played alongside some very familiar faces if you're a St. Louisan. Here he is before a game against the Kosovo under-21s with Jonas Horn and Marcel Hartl, and here he is before a match against the Irish under-21s with Edouard Leuven and Cedric Teuchert. And wouldn't you know it, 5 to 7 years later, we have a possible reunion between these guys. We'll get to that. But he'd also be opponents against some of these players in the Bundesliga. For instance, while Baumgartl was growing at Stuttgart, Teuchert was bagging goals for FC Nuremberg. So by the end of the 2018-19 season, his stock was shooting through the roof. He was definitely on the radar for the German national team. He was 23 years old, and he was playing on a regular basis for a Bundesliga side. That is, until that side was no longer in the Bundesliga. Stuttgart was relegated to the second Bundesliga once again at the end of that season, and the club decided that it was time to cash in on their rising star instead of having him lurk in the second division. So he gets his first big move of his career in the summer of 2019, moving to Netherlands powerhouse PSV Eindhoven for a reported 10 million euros. That is a lot of money. Sometimes in football, a player gets transferred for big bucks and it just flat out doesn't work out. Felipe Coutinho was an example at Barcelona. Eden Hazard at Real Madrid is another. And I won't even mention Romelu Lukaku going to Chelsea without getting something thrown at me. Oh God. But on a much smaller scale to those guys, Timo Baumgartl just flat out did not work for PSV. And this is the turning point of this story, and it's only going to get rockier from here. He played 21 games at PSV, spread out over 2 seasons, but his playing time dwindled down to nothing in the final third of the 2019-2020 season. Then he only got 8 more appearances in 2020 and 21. And that last part came about after he rejected a loan to Fulham. The Athletic published 2 reports on the same day on October 5th, 2020, that Baumgartl went to London to undergo a medical in preparation for the move, which had an option to buy. But then the Athletic reported later that day that the loan collapsed after Baumgartl himself pulled out of the deal. Reasons weren't clear as to why he turned down a chance to join a newly promoted Premier League side, but it happened. After languishing in the COVID season of 2020-21, Timo did agree to a loan to Union Berlin and was a regular in the 2021-22 season, rejoining Cedric Teuchert for a season and a half. He seemed on his way to bouncing his career back. But at the end of the season, during a routine checkup, it was discovered that Timo had testicular cancer.
Ja, es ist schwer in Worte zu fassen. Es ist so, dass bei einer Vorsorgeuntersuchung bei mir ein Tumor im Hoden entdeckt wurde, der jetzt in der letzten Woche auch operativ entfernt wurde. Soweit geht es mir gut. War natürlich schon ein kleiner Schock. Ja, erwartet man jetzt nicht so bei so einer Untersuchung, aber wie gesagt, die Operation ist gut verlaufen. Alle Prognosen sind positiv, von daher gehe ich auch positiv in die nächsten Wochen.
Surgery and several rounds of chemotherapy followed that summer, and as you can imagine, it was rough on Timo and his girlfriend and his family. But amazingly enough, it took him just 5 months to get back on the field for Union Berlin, who extended his loan another season. He only missed 6 games, and on September 18th, he was back in the starting 11.
Das ist unsere Nummer 25, Timo Baumgartl.
But he would only play 8 games that season, partly because he just wasn't fully fit yet, but also because Union Berlin had found other options at center back that year. So eager to get his career back on track and seeing an opportunity that offseason for playing time at a newly fallen giant of German football, Timo signed on a free with Schalke. Schalke had just suffered its second relegation to the second Bundesliga in just 3 years. This was a big club that had just played in the Champions League as recently as the 2017-2018 season, and helping Schalke get back to the Bundesliga would certainly raise Baumgartl's stock. But organizational and financial instability has plagued Schalke. The club just this last season teetered just 3 points out of the relegation zone at the end of the calendar year. And because the club was hemorrhaging money left and right, the club would not have even been able to play in the third Liga. They couldn't afford the license to play in third Liga, so they would have had to pull a Bordeaux and step down to the 4th division of German football, which is their non-leagues. And so maybe you're starting to see why a player like Baumgartl, who has pedigree, has played at the heights of the Bundesliga and the national level, might get a little jaded with what's going on. The first sign of trouble for Timo came in late September 2023 when he was suspended by head coach Thomas Reis for publicly criticizing the coach's tactics in a post-game interview. The suspension lasted all of 1 game, and he did publicly apologize. But one reason why that suspension lasted just 1 game could have something to do with the fact that Thomas Reis was sacked not long after the suspension happened. Timo was used very sparingly from there. He had been an every game starter up until the suspension, but after returning from it, he only started 5 games from October until March, and mostly was left to rot on the bench. In his last start, a 3-0 defeat to FC Magdeburg on February 24th, Baumgartl was pulled at halftime. And that would be the end of Timo's playing time altogether. New head coach Karel Geerts demoted Timo to the under-23s, saying he's not been happy with his performances, and even going so far as to kind of suggest he'd be a liability by playing him down the stretch. Schalke would finish 10th this season. And there would be no redemption arc at Schalke for Timo, as his contract was mutually terminated near the end of the summer transfer window. Sporting director Mark Wilmots, who had only come on at the start of the 2023-24 season, called it a logical and good solution for both the player and the club. Kind of ominous. By the way, a month later, Wilmots and Geerts would be sacked. Gee, I wonder why. Now, if it sounds like I'm suggesting Schalke was the problem in this relationship between club and player, it's kind of because I am. It's hard to know exactly what went down in the locker room between the coaches and the player because we're not privy to that as fans, and clubs keep that pretty guarded. But anyone who's been following the Schalke situation for the past couple of years knows how much of a raging trash fire the club has been both on and off the field. The club nearly dissolved during the COVID years. They almost went bankrupt, and had they been relegated last year, as I mentioned before, they could have been dissolved again or simply been yeeted down to the 4th tier like Bordeaux in France. Now, others that cover the Schalke situation in depth, you can check out one of those videos up on the top right. But on the surface, it seems like this marriage may have been doomed to fail from the start. Timo was a highly promising player, and his career trajectory was heading to all sorts of new heights just 5 years ago with a big sale to PSV. But between struggling there, a cancer diagnosis, and having to play on a dying giant in a lower league, you could definitely see how a player with the pedigree and, for lack of a better word, expectations of Timo Baumgartl might become jaded with the situation at Schalke and may flounder there. And he did. And if this story of bad luck sounds familiar to you as a St. Louis fan, Jonas Horn came to St. Louis after injuries and a bad marriage at FC Nuremberg in the second Bundesliga. And few can deny that by the time the final matches of 2024 happened, Horn did look to be a pretty inspired signing for St. Louis. My friend Jerry Hayes, who you may know her as Be Good Do Good on Twitter, has a slogan, Trust in Lutz. And what we do know about how Lutz Pfannenstiel likes to build a club is he likes Germans from the second Bundesliga, that's obvious, but he can sort through the clutter and the noise and spot a reclamation project, and he is prioritizing locker room chemistry after Bradley Carnell's tenure as the gaffer. And you saw earlier how Baumgartl's already played alongside the likes of Jonas Horn, Cedric Teuchert, Marcel Hartl, and Edouard Leuven, whether it was on the club level or with the Germany under-21s. These players know each other. They know what they're about, and there's probably a chance that they've been communicating with each other already. And building a German base like this does help when you bring Germans in from overseas. Players often have a hard time adapting to life overseas, especially if they don't know anyone on that new club. Take, for instance, Nicholas Dürr. He went right back to Denmark after arriving here after just a handful of appearances. Jabulo Blom had all sorts of bad luck here and didn't have an ally over here that he knew, so he's back in South Africa with Kaiser Chiefs. And then you have Simon Betcher, who went to AC Horsens in Denmark. Now he's back in America. But if you bring Baumgartl into the St. Louis locker room with a lot of familiar faces that speak a very familiar language, that will only help with the adaptability aspect and perhaps smooth over some personality concerns that come from his tumultuous time at Schalke. Remember, this guy just beat cancer barely 2 years ago. But if you look at his injury history from Transfermarkt, there's not really much to be worried about. He does get dinged up here and there. He hasn't really missed extended period of time outside of the cancer in 2022. But I haven't really talked about what kind of player Timo is. These infographs from his time in the Bundesliga in 2021-22 and this past season in the second Bundesliga do kind of hint at a few things. He's fairly proficient at tackling and intercepting, and he isn't afraid of a challenge. But he's also a progressive passer, and that's something Lutz seems to have prioritized. Recent acquisition Henry Kessler, for example, is adept at advancing the ball forward out from the backline to start attacks and counters, and countering is still a big part of St. Louis's philosophy. Remember, being able to yeet the ball forward is something that Roman Bürki specializes in. We can even look at his Football Manager 24 stats to get a clue on what player he is. His categories are on a scale of 1 to 20, by the way, with 20 being elite, and we see he's not especially fast or especially a physical freak, but he does have good size. He has a capability of being a great aerial winner at the MLS level, and FM also notes his ability to man mark and tackle. All in all, it suggests that Baumgartl is a solid player when healthy and when not dealing with a dumpster fire of a club, and his overall ability in the game actually ties him at second with Edouard Leuven on the St. Louis roster, both behind Bürki, of course. But I guess the next question is, what's his role going to be on the team? It would appear on the surface that St. Louis is going to get a starting level center back, but Joachim Nilsson and Henry Kessler already have that on lockdown. Plus, you have Kyle Hebert, who has proven to be a capable third or fourth center back on the club. Adding Baumgartl adds to an already crowded center back situation on paper. You have Timo, you have Nilsson, you have Kessler, you have Hebert, Josh Yarrow, Michael Wenzel, who just got a big club contract next year, by the way, Jake Girdwood Reich, Jonas Horn, Jake Nerwinski, and Chris Durkin. Jay Reed also saw some time at center back this year as well. But to me, signing Baumgartl is a sign of possible intent. We would finally have the depth to switch to a 3-in-the-back system if we so choose. We did tinker with it quite a bit this past season, and we do know how our fullbacks operate. Thomas Totland, Jaden Reed particularly like to play far up the field, and we've seen at times how they get caught too far up the field and struggle coming back. And with a 2 center back system, it's left us kind of, twisting in the wind on the back line at times on counters. Playing 3 at the back would allow our fullbacks to play further up the pitch and would leave 3 center backs in the back to provide a solid wall in front of Bürki so he doesn't have to be Superman all the time. But regardless of how he is used, this does appear to be a calculated reclamation project that Lutz and company are about to undertake should this transfer go through. And given that we use center backs like we use underwear in 2024, I really can't blame Lutz for looking at more depth. And given our locker room issues in 2024, I really can't blame Lutz for looking for another friendly face to add to his German core either. But the big question remains, is there anything left to salvage with Timo Baumgartl after all of his issues? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more St. Louis City analysis like this. Consider joining my supporter section for just 99 cents a month. Helps get me out to more games and do more vlogs like I tend to do on this channel. This is your soccer zombie, Tom Franklin, and I have done a lot of analysis this year on St. Louis transfers that have been coming in, even some that have been going out. And remember how I mentioned that Timo situation reminded me a lot of Giannis Horns? Well, if you want to see what I'm talking about, the video is right up here. By the way, Horn came from Nuremberg, and this might be the most interested of St. Louis and has been in Nuremberg since, well, we don't talk about that. The trials. Not a good subject.